Here is an example of a PowerPoint used to review for in-class quizzes 5 and 6 together. The terms and concepts presented during this section of the course were particularly challenging, so I decided to include multiple choice options below each question. I encouraged the same amount of participation from students in past quizzes, for example, raising hands to give answers and working in pairs or groups to discuss options. But this time I used the new morph transition in PowerPoint to visually emphasize the answer when it's given. Notice how the text is made larger and the color changes smoothly across slides. And as usual, my use of humor keeps a light, fun atmosphere for student learning. That's especially important here because the material can seem overwhelming. So, this format continues throughout the normal study session. Notice my use of images here. This image was the background of a slide in my presentation of Arnold Schoenberg's Verklärt. It also enhances the setting of Richard Demel's poem. For example, the moon shining through the trees, the darkness of the night and the misty ground. There's no man and woman walking, but for visual learners, and myself included, visual stimuli like this can help a student remember a lecture and possibly the content that was presented, maybe even come up with the correct answer just based on their memory. The review for the two quizzes continues, question and answer as such. Again, this was really challenging material for the students. I didn't want to decrease their self-efficacy. I wanted them to feel good about themselves. But I also wanted to challenge them to come up with the right answers. So I think there's a combination of both here. There's a lot of questions in this review because I'm preparing them to take both quizzes 5 and 6, which dealt with the same section of the course. Then we come to the listening identification. So this format should look familiar to you if you watched my other quiz review video, which was the review for quiz 4. The students are told to work in groups to answer all 4 selections correctly from left to right. During this particular review session for quizzes 5 and 6, I brought in physically large letters A through D printed on 8.5 by 11 paper sheets. And I told the students to select 4 representatives to coordinate with each other and display the correct answers in order so I could see them from left to right. This added another element of activity to their learning. It also made it a more enjoyable experience for all. Answers were then compared on the whiteboard, and the reasoning behind why answers were given is discussed as a class. A second example is posed. New answers given and discussed. But this time, I wanted to do something a little more fun and interactive, so I incorporated a challenge round. I put a disclaimer at the top so as not to stress any students out, that this is not for the quiz, it is just for having fun. But really, I was preparing them for the quiz here because all of these composers, Leonard Bernstein, Samuel Barber, Aaron Copland, were covered in the American Nationalism lecture. And what this set of 2 slides, this listening ID preparation does, is compares the different styles of these composers. As the students listened to these excerpts included in the audio files that I play back in class, they must have felt overwhelmed to some extent, but definitely not stressed out because, as I mentioned above, this is not for the quiz, this is just for fun. At the same time, they were hearing the different styles of Bernstein, Barber, and Copeland, and then given the answers. And this was just an additional step of making them feel better about how they're doing with their listening ID and identifying musical elements, which we had been doing the entire semester as a class. But also an interactive way to experience this music as a class.